Ivor Cummins, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Oh, great to be back again. Yeah, certainly interesting times, as the Chinese would say.
The last time you and I chatted was a few years ago, actually.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was comical to watch. I mean, obviously it's a tragedy, but it has funny elements. So COVID and all that nonsense went through, and then suddenly it was dropped like a hot potato. And I think it was because the game was up and the system was realizing, a large minority of people know that this thing is ridiculous, with Omicron and all that stuff. So across the UK and Ireland, and then generally, within a few days, it just got dumped. But then Ukraine immediately replaced it. Like it was just a straight swap of actors. And then we had monkeypox and that failed. Bird flu recently. More wars in the East. It's just non-stop kind of psyop proxy war lunacy, really. And that's the world we live in, You might as well get used to it and not be fazed by it. I often try and advise people on mental health and mental strength and resilience. And you just can't be getting fazed about stuff beyond your control. You must focus on your circle of control, not the circle of concern. But that's a long story. But yeah, that's what I try and help people now with my workshops online on mental strength and critical thinking, etc. It's just a time for people to do what they can to spread awareness, do what they can to resist the lunacy, but not get down, not get miserable, not get nervous or anxious, because that gives a win to the bad guys. I try and explain that to people, even in family. If you get in any way down or nervous or apprehensive, it weakens you and the bad guy smiles. So you just can't allow that. How could you allow giving a win to the evil mofos up top who are driving this? You can't do that. Come on, guys.
People have now forgotten.
That's just a psychological defense mechanism. I mean, you've got in the population, as you well know, you've got around 30% who are lost, who are just Marxist, leftist, just will follow anything, trust the experts, regardless. So 30% are gone. 10 or 20% critical thinkers on a good day. You got a big bunch in the middle who know something's wrong, but they don't want to stick their head up and be called a conspiracy theorist, so they keep their mouth shut. That's roughly the population. But the 30% who are gone, they just automatically won't get into the topic because as far as they're concerned, we did the right thing. And then the masses in the middle kind of know something's rotten and they worked it out in the end and they realized the conspiracy theorists were correct. And that's very embarrassing and it's very difficult for self-esteem. So you have to forget it. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, the term conspiracy theorist became a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd come across it somewhat because since 2013, I was out on YouTube about cholesterol being nonsense and fat being healthy and carbohydrate being the problem and all that stuff, low carb type stuff. So I'd come across it. Whenever you threaten industry or oligarchies, you'll begin to come across it. But you could ignore it. It was just an amusement when a cholesterol expert lipidologist would really lose his nuts in an argument and you'd beat him. And then they'd start wailing conspiracy theorists. So it's the lender of last resort. I mean, the most ridiculous kind of slur. But that's all you've got. But yeah, you're right. Since COVID, it came out of the gates, not as a lender of last resort, as a massive psyop. Wall-to-wall psyop, morning, noon and night. Every single nuance of questioning the experts got the label. So, yeah, it was nuclear fusion, thermonuclear device use of conspiracy theorists. And we know, of course, I believe the genesis is the CIA and the intelligence and the military in America. They had a brilliant idea. They had all these new weapons and you had lots of locals very curious, particularly maybe anti-government types, and people were sniffing. So they got this one idiot who had a very fanciful imagination, and they used agents as fake whistleblowers, and they just fed him information about aliens. That's perfect. So this guy gets a following, and he goes out talking about aliens, and suddenly you've got all the masses not looking at the ball, and it's perfect. And that's what they did again and again, and it's like the big lie. The perfect thing, make the lie so big and so absurd that most people won't believe it could possibly be a lie. And we got loads of big lies, right? These are very clever tricks and very simple, but very effective. Yeah, unfortunately.
Would you go back to 2019?
Oh, wow, that's a question. I often comment with the family, and part of it is to kind of make light of things towards what I mentioned about having people, there's no point being anxious. I mentioned that we're living in the most exciting times. I mean, back in 2017, I was working full-time as a manager, technical manager and master technologist in corporate. So I was a corporate whore, and life was okay. I had all my cholesterol and fat on YouTube world and giving lectures around the world on interesting stuff. So that was good. But now we're living in a world that is fascinating. Now, it carries a load of a threat. There's a danger to the future of our children, our grandchildren. It's serious stuff. It should be really disheartening and worrying. But I'm inclined to say, truthfully, on behalf of the people, which I always work for at the end of the day, I'd rather it was 19. Because I can't wish the lunacy of what's happening on people, right? That's not right. But outside of that, myself personally, I like the excitement and the thrill of battle against these evil buggers. It makes life really interesting. I think it's all to play for. We can lose and end up sharing the last cigarette butt in the 15-minute city. It could happen, but if we did what we could before that, we can be stoical about that. Or the whole thing could roll over and collapse under its own weight, which we've seen signs of regularly. So I think it's all to play for, and I love the militaristic feel to it, that we're not just moping along like we did for decades. We're now involved in a kind of a great battle of sorts. It's very invigorating. So I'm caught on that one, to be honest.
Just before we started recording, had scrambled eggs and bacon.
Well, that's the perfect breakfast. And in myself and Dr. Gerber's book, Eat Rich, Live Long, we have 50, 60 recipes and a chef. But we have many egg-based breakfast-style recipes. So the perfect breakfast is so quick. All you need is, say, a half dozen eggs. There's no point eating 1 or 2 eggs, and it's a joke, you know? It's like having 1 beer. Come on, stupid. But you get around 5 or 6 eggs, and you make an omelette, and you can put in chopped chives, and you can put in some mushroom or green peppers. I like bell peppers, not hot peppers. Maybe some ham or whatever. You can throw in whatever you have and do this big omelette and cover it in salt. It's delicious, and it's a superfood. Eggs are a superfood. Organ meats are a superfood. Fatty, well-reared meats are superfoods. Fish are superfood. These are the superfoods. The list I just gave, it kind of runs out after that. I mean, these leafy green nonsenses, they're not superfoods. They might have a few minerals and they've got some utility, but superfoods are nutrient dense. They're animal-based foods. So that's a perfect breakfast. And my wife even sometimes does liver for breakfast. I'm not crazy on liver. I know. Like my mother did when people were wise. But I'm not crazy on organ meats unless they're cooked just right. But then I did develop a Organ Ultra supplement with Extend Life in New Zealand for people who don't like organ meats. You know, you still should get the goodness.
So that was a very terrible segue on my behalf. I went from 2019 to breakfast, but I'm doing that because that's your strength.
I mean, it's like over the last, I just mentioned to people, this is around 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. When you think about it, you don't want to get into conspiracy theories. And I often wanted to stay away from that with the low carb and nutrition work I did for a decade. But I would say to people, if you look at all the health choices, even pre-COVID, that were made by the authorities, think of it like flipping a coin and tails is getting it wrong. Can you flip a coin 12, 13, 14 times and get it wrong in a row? Well, do the math. It's extremely unlikely. But they got it wrong on cholesterol, wrong on fat, wrong on the sun, wrong on salt. You go on and on over 50 years, and probabilistically, you know it's not constant stupidity that makes them get the wrong answer every single time. And what it is it's industry and it's interests. And they always push towards making the population unhealthy, because the food industry, it needs cheap, poisonous foods to make money and to get shelf life, like vegetable oils and refined carbs. They cost nothing and they give shelf life, and they're addictive. So that's why the food industry does it. It's not a conspiracy theory. But there's another benefit, that as people get fat and diabetic from their food, they actually get more hungry and they eat more. So there's a built-in growth for their Wall Street numbers, right? And they know this at the top. So the food industry is doing it for all those reasons, and they're funding the nutritional colleges. Most of the money now is flooding from industry to fund the nutrition councils and training of nutritionists. So they've captured the whole space, as corporates do. But then you've got Big Pharma, and they fund nonsense, of course, because they make so much money from the cholesterol nonsense. But also, there's a kind of a synergy there. The food industry is feeding them customers by making people sick, so they can sell their antihypertensives and all their other junk and their cancer medicines, to be quite honest. So you've got these two biggest industries in the world, Big Pharma, Big Food, massive industries with lobbying up the wazoo and practical ownership of the FDA and the food regulation authorities. And what do you expect? Yeah, the coin will keep flipping on the wrong side for a half century. So there's no conspiracy. There is a conspiracy, but it's so obvious. It's not like subtle or hidden. And that's the whole food and pharma. And when COVID came up, of course, you don't have to think about it for a nanosecond. The authorities were pushing this ridiculousness for the vaccine, which probably is for the global digital ID, for CBDC down the road. Fine. So that's obvious. But they want the people to be sicker and more depressed and locked down because it makes them malleable and it works with the COVID program. So yeah, they're going to stop everything healthy and just have them as sick and deranged as possible. Why not? And that was it. They're pretty sick puppies. I mean, up top, a lot of useful idiots down lower. I mean, if we're honest about it, and I went through this in many videos, most of the officials driving this were largely hypnotized themselves. Deep down, they probably thought this is a bit ridiculous, but they know that their job and their salary depended on them getting on board. But they kind of convinced themselves it was somewhat legitimate. That's the massive army of useful idiots across the world. But if you move up the top, it's a relatively small number of people who pulled all the strings. I mean, a great example, I'll finish on this, the masks. The masks in summer of 2020 across Europe and America. Astonishing. And I thought, right, we've got the whole summer till next winter now, and our group of doctors and professors in Ireland, COVID recovery, I told them, art of war, we own the terrain now from April, May, right through to probably October, the virus will awaken or the whole winter thing will start. We own the territory. So let's make hay while the sun shines. And then the clever buggers up the top, and no one knows exactly who or what panel. It came from so high up, you couldn't tell where it came from, but very high up. The word came down the pyramidal structure, mask those little buggers. And it happened within a week or two, with prison sentences and fines came in coincident with the masks. They didn't bring in the masks in the middle of the summer when the hospitals were empty and nothing was happening, which is absurd as it stands. Because people would say, hold on a minute. So they brought them in with the prison sentences and emergency laws so they could force it home from the get-go. And they did. We had an Irish granny down in Cork who refused to wear them, and she went to court several times, and they put her in prison for a few days for not wearing a filthy piece of cloth over her face. So it's crazy, isn't it? They are sick puppies.
Other than vaccines and mainstream media, what are the chronic causes of disease?
Disease, yeah. I have a simple thing just for lay people, and I say, okay, devil's triad. 2 words, devil's triad. What's the devil's triad? It's the root, the largest root of modern chronic disease across the board, whether it's type 2 diabetes, which causes nearly all heart attacks, or heart attacks, which are nearly all type 2 diabetes, or then you have Alzheimer's, which some would call type 3 diabetes. So you see where I'm going here. And Parkinson's, 1 or 2 have begun to suggest type 4 diabetes. So this insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, blood glucose malady is probably 80% now of Americans over 45 are essentially diabetic at some level. So this is the big thing. So what's the root or the pillar that is built on, all that suffering? Devil's triad. Sugar, refined grains, refined wheats, and seed oils made in chemical plants. The vegetable oils supposedly heart healthy, that are inflammatory and toxic, disgusting muck. That's the devil's triad. And the problem with the devil's triad is if you generally don't eat sugar, which is great, and you don't buy bottles of seed oils or use them, that's great. And you don't use refined grains, and you don't really use wheat at all, that's great. There's still a massive problem. And this is what gets people. Ultra-processed foods are around 55% of the calories eaten in the UK in the BMJ report a few years ago. Ultra-processed foods are built on the devil's triad. So you got to be a label reader because most of the foods you're reaching out. I'll give an example. Seed oils, I mentioned, dreadful. Okay. Hellmann's mayonnaise, big brand. Look on the back. Delicious mayonnaise with eggs and stuff, really healthy, yeah. 78% seed oil. 4/5 almost seed oil. And that's just an illustration. You gotta read the labels. And the first few ingredients, the ingredients are legally put in order of the amount of them. So in the first several ingredients, if you see real food and good stuff, and then down the bottom, maybe there's a little bit of something, it might be okay. But when you see Hellmann's 78% seed oil up the top, wow. Enjoy poisoning yourself. And this is the problem. Devil's triad, which the processed food empire is built on, and it's most of our calories nowadays. That's the big thing. And then if you add in the other things, a lack of nutrient-dense meat, fish, and eggs and organ meats is a problem. Minerals and vitamins of various sorts, depending on the person, can be a problem, but each person's different, but magnesium, potassium, and a few other key ones are important, or you'll probably have problems. Lack of sun exposure, UV, vitamin D, nitric oxide, all the stuff you get from sun exposure. A lack of that is a risk for chronic disease. And then a lack of exercise, I'd acknowledge, but I think if you just do resistance training 20 minutes twice a week and do some weights to failure and press-ups, you'll kind of cover the exercise gap. You don't need to do much. 50 minutes a week, you'll probably tick that box. There's probably other things I've forgotten, but if you fixed all those things, remove the devil's triad, ultra-processed food, eat meat, fish, and eggs, and nutrient-dense food primarily, do a little bit of good exercise, get as much sun as you can without burning, and a few more things. If everyone did that, chronic disease would just fall off a cliff over the next weeks, months, years. And most of pharma would kind of have to shut down because hypertension would disappear. I mean, it would be astonishing if that were done. But industry's making sure that will not be done, of course.
When you talk about these things, people tend to push back a lot, particularly when you say, well, you must cut back on your sugar or your carbs. I eat pasta and I'm healthy. And look at India and look at China with all the rice.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole Japan, China, India blue zones thing, it does confuse a lot of people. So if you're eating rice, unprocessed rice with zero vegetable oils or wheats, let's say, and you're subsistence people who has to struggle to get enough food, lean and needy, like these vast populations. If you're a subsistence and you're using rice as a base calorie and you're getting just enough to keep you going, along with these ancient peoples in the old days always targeted nutrient-dense foods. They made sure they got hold of whatever fish or whatever meat they could get. It was highly prized. So you're targeting nutrient-dense foods, but in fairness, they ain't easy to get. So you need basic bulk calories as well, like rice. If you live in that way, out in the sun with healthy, non-stressed, kind of traditional societal values, not the modern stress, so you don't have that problem. You've got these meats, fish and eggs, and these bulk calories from rice, and you live like that on a subsistence level, you won't get diabetes. You won't get any problems. Okay. But yeah, if you are a Western person now who's overweight with a little bit of an issue from eating the processed food and the devil's triad, it is absolutely a very tricky path to try and do an ancestral Indian diet. You still have to remove all vegetable oils and sugars. Remember that. You have to remove refined wheats, because wheat is independently toxic. So you still got to do most of the stuff. But you eat mostly rice now and fish and meat. But you got to eat it really sparingly. Remember? Subsistence. So no one in the West is going to replicate that ancestral type scenario. So comparing to it is absurd. But a lot of people don't get the nuances in what I just said. They, like you said, they just say, oh, but they eat rice. Well, India, by the way, is diabetes ridden, right? There's feet coming off in Italy or in India being amputated every 5 seconds. So once the vegetable oils got into India and the modern sugary drinks and the other stuff, they just exploded in diabetes. Japan's not too bad, but again, Japan were doing the same thing. Women would titrate the amount of rice they eat to maintain their body weight at an acceptable level. So if Japanese women, this goes back 100 years or more, this was documented, I think, turn of the century. If a woman had an illness and got very skinny or was hospitalized and needed to put on weight, they'd increase their rice portion. They knew it would build weight. And if a woman was a bit fat, she would reduce her rice and focus on the meat, fish, and egg side. And the French women were the same with bread. They titrated bread. The joke in France decades ago was, go over 25, you got to start being real careful with your bread. So all of this stuff is understood, but to the layperson, you know, what you said, they have a simplistic view of it. It's tricky.
I go hunting, so I guess I'm already a few points ahead of everybody else who buys their meat from the store.
No, that's perfect. And it will tend to be leaner meat in general, but that doesn't matter. Now, fat's where the flavor is and a lot of vitamins.
Just cook it in butter.
Well, exactly. You can add. That's the perfect thing. And in Ireland, funny enough, not because we're all super planned and strategic around having healthy meats, we just happen to have such vast grasslands that grass-fed is the economical way to have the herds in Ireland, and still largely is. So we automatically get grass-fed healthy, and we've banned all these antibiotics that America allows completely legally. So Ireland happens to have grass-fed super meats, and even McDonald's in Ireland uses 100% Irish beef in the patties. No wheat, nothing. They get the fat content high enough, it's a binder. And the patties, if you go in and order like 6 or 3 double cheeseburgers and you throw away the bones, you're eating nutrient-dense superfood. People get confused about that as well. They think everything in McDonald's is junk. Depends on the country. I'm not sure about the patties in other countries, but in Ireland, you've got superfood McDonald's. If you don't take the drink or the vegetable oil soaked fries and you throw away the bones, you got superfood McDonald's. Oh, okay.
The sauce.
The sauce, but again, the dose defines the poison. So I looked up years ago what was in McDonald's sauce, and to be honest, it's sugary, but the little dab that they put on the burger, I wouldn't get too anal about it. Like, you're talking less than a teaspoon of sugar. And to be fair, it's very small. But wipe it off if you want to be purist. But the main thing is the buns, the fries, the drinks, and everything else. But the patties, boom.
Is that why everybody has become fat?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, look, it's a complex thing because there's second order effects. So, you know, when people begin to get fat, they bestow fatness propensity upon their children. So women who are insulin resistant kind of predispose their babies to come out of at birth as high insulin resistance. So you're making a problem as you begin to get fat that's getting second order or roll-on effects, and that's why the curve went up so bad since the 70s and 80s. It's just like an inflection point straight up, and then it levels off as it reaches absurdity. That's where we are now. But this problem, even if you fix the food supply, because of the second order effects on all the fat mothers and all this, there's nothing sexist about that, by the way, it's just a biochemical fact. Very overweight, insulin resistant mothers create part of another added problem. So if you kind of begin to fix things, the obesity won't come down really quickly because you've built a hysteresis into the problem. It's become so big and it's got inertia. But that aside, what caused it? Broadly, it was not lack of exercise. People often try to say we stopped exercising. Well, in the 70s and 80s, they changed the food guidelines. And they basically worked with industry and said, eat vegetable oils and eat carbs. And they meant, give them some credit, they meant eat
and low fat. Everything was low fat.
Oh, exactly. But because it was low fat, you've got to eat something else. And the answer was eat vegetable oils, because they're not saturated fat, and eat carbohydrates. So the low fat obsession just led to eat this crap. And to give them credit, a lot of them did intend you to eat lots of vegetables, carbs. But what happened was industry came in with the refined wheat, and it was inevitable. The carbs people were going to start eating were going to be refined carbs, because that's where industry was going. So the reality, they had the devil's triad. Since the 70s and 80s, the devil's triad exploded, which I mentioned is the root of modern chronic disease. The devil's triad was just blessed by academia and the experts as what you should eat. So they blessed the devil's triad. So go figure. And then the obesity and diabetes just took off. And during that period in engineering, and I do a critical thinking masterclass online now, there's comparative analysis, Kepner-Trago, and you look at what happened and the different states, and you do compares. Well, what did come up with the problem? What did not come up? And the hilarious thing is the red meat that they talk nonsense about, that's all geopolitical. There's nothing to do with health. But all this anti-meat thing, the red meat per capita came down across those 40 years, while the problems went up. And what went up is vegetable oils and carbs. Clearly, the red meat went down. And what it went up was chicken. But real nutrient-dense red meat went down. So at one glance, you can tell, well, and the exercise did not change enough to have any real impact on this. Lack of exercise is certainly now a problem in the last 20 years. But the curve was heading away up without the exercise changing. In fact, there were periods of obsession with gyms going on in the 80s and 90s. There was a boom and all that Fonda crap. So yeah, it's just so simple. I mean, that's just what happened. That's it.
I grind my beans and I drink coffee with cream. I've tried it with butter. It's just too rich. And it takes
oily,
away the
slick.
Yeah.
On the top, little bubbles of oily, buttery. The flavor of butter is delicious, melted onto some things, but in coffee, it doesn't work. Yeah, I agree.
No, it doesn't work. And then have bacon and eggs or have some sort of high-fat breakfast, and you're sorted for the day.
Absolutely.
And then last night, for example, I made a rump steak. I fried it in a bit of olive oil and butter. I want to ask you about olive oil. And I did a type of very simple salady thing on the side with carrot and cabbage, ginger, and one or two other things. It was delicious and very low carbs. Yeah. And you feel great. Oh, and I had a glass of red wine with my wife, and I feel amazing.
Yeah, I usually have a bit too much of the wine. That's my only naughty risk to
That's why I said a glass, because I'm very liberal with what a glass means.
Well, on one level I can agree with you. Yeah, a glass, but do you know the comedy glasses that they in some of the memes? That's probably what a glass I have. But yeah, I mean,
it's a glass that holds 750 mils.
Yeah, sounds familiar. Do as I say, not as I do. And I'm often honest in my weight loss masterclass and health. I did one last night, actually, 2.5 hours roughly. I have the green screen up here, by the way, but I couldn't do a background on Riverside. But behind the screen is a 75-inch touchscreen, a big Samsung. So I do a class with a black kind of curtain and this huge screen, and you can do interactive examples. It's actually working pretty well. But yeah, I mean, that's I have one meal a day generally. It works for me. It keeps my life simple. All day long from when I get up, I have the coffee with double cream. So I'm not totally fasted, but I'm not anal about it. And all day long, I can work with no interruptions for lunches, breakfast, yada, yada, yada. And I know at the end of the day at 5 or 6 p.m., I'm going to have my evening meal. And I look forward to it. And hunger is a good sauce, right? So I'm not too hungry during the day. I'm fine. It's a habit now, but I know what's coming. And I really, I really enjoy it when it comes. Women, I think, and I explained this last night, as I always do, broadly, females, 2 meals a day seems to work a bit better. Males, it seems 1 meal a day is achievable by anyone. Once you get fat adapted and you're off the carbs for a week or two and you level out and you can burn your own fat with impunity, then you can merge to 1 meal a day and change your life. It's the way to go. It's the way to go. You know, another funny thing, Jerm, it just occurs to me, performance drug. So for me, fasting is a performance drug. Now that sounds silly, right? That sounds like acupuncture or homeopathy or whatever you want to say. No offense to people who are into that, but things that would not be automatically, obviously good. When I was giving lectures back 2015-16, I was new to big audiences outside of corporate. So I'd done big talks in corporate with 50, 80 people. But now I was beginning to be invited to conferences with 500, 600, 800 people. And it was new to me. So one of the edges I used, and it worked great, I would not eat anything for at least 24 hours, or maybe 28 or 9, before I went on stage. And I go on stage completely fasted, my brain running probably 60% on beta-hydroxybutyrate from the ketogenic state I was in, and 40% glucose, whereas everyone runs on 100% glucose. I think that's part of it. And brain-derived neuropathic factor goes up with BHB from keto. So lots of papers in this showing the brain works differently and it works better in that state. So it was a performance drug. And to be quite honest, I'd be scared to go on stage in those days. If you forced me to eat a meal 2 or 3 hours before, I'd actually be concerned. Now, after a while, I could get up in front of 50,000 now and I couldn't care less. But back then, in the early days, it was an edge. And it is an edge. And I think evolutionarily, this is just a guess, I have not seen this written. But if you have no food for 24 hours in ancient times, that usually wasn't because you wanted to fit in a nice dress, right? That was because you didn't have food. And that's as dangerous as it gets in the wild. So I think in the first few hours after food, you feel hunger because the system wants to make sure you keep nourishing yourself. That's okay. But after around 24 hours, and I hear at 2 days, you get a kind of euphoria of clarity. Well, that makes sense because after a day or two with no food, you're now at high risk as far as the system's concerned. So you can't be going around muddled from lack of food. You need to be the opposite. You need to be a hyper hunter, right? Because you got to work, you got to fix something here or you're dead. So I think that's part of why when the brain switches over with lack of food to beta-hydroxybutyrate, it operates at a sharper, more clarifying level. Your responses, everything gets clearer. It's hard to describe because most people don't go 24 hours without food. You should try it. It's amazing.
But Ivor, you're just talking nonsense. All that's required is just a balanced diet.
And eat a little and often, regularly, 6 or 7 times a day. That's what industry says. Don't skip your breakfast. Have a snack if you feel hungry, a healthy carbohydrate snack. Yeah, go figure. It's like the coin again, right? It flipped on the wrong side again. They tell you to eat regularly. That's not good because when you eat and digest, it takes quite a bit of energy and hormones all rise and change. And all of that disturbance is not ideal. But you need to do it because you need to eat. But if you eat the right foods, it minimizes it. And if you only eat once a day, you get 24 hours of the day, each day. You are free from all those hormonal disturbances and all that machinery having to work. I mean, it's just super ideal to do one meal a day for Homo sapiens. And I think that's evolutionarily, that's what kind of happened. Hunters got up and they weren't going to sit down to a big feast of eggs and whatever, generally. They went out hunting all day, and I think generally then they feasted when they got back with the kill. I think that's broadly our heritage. And you're maintaining that heritage now. Personally, I like that with the hunting.
Well, I mean, can you hunt in Ireland?
Oh, yes. I was from the age of 13 or 14. I was very lucky as a city boy. My pal locally in Dublin City, his father had a farm around 50 miles away in the middle of nowhere. And we got to go down Wednesday nights and weekends for years doing turf, hay baling in the summer, fencing, cattle moving, cattle crushing. Ooh, painful. And all of that stuff. And he was very libertarian, and he'd say, be careful with those guns, lads. This is what Mr. Quinn would say. But he would allow us to take the double barrel 12 bore and the single barrel with us when we were 14, maybe 13, and go down the fields and down to the bog and the firs with our pockets full of cartridges. And he just told us to be careful, but he let us that freedom, which was fantastic. Nowadays, it's the opposite, as you know. I mean, that's the way it should be. Occasionally, you'll have an accident. Look, shit happens. But kids need to be out there doing and learning. He would also let us take the tractor, the Massey 35X, the classic old tractor, and he would let us take that on the little public road and go a couple of miles to go fishing. So we'd go fishing in the tractor. We had transport at the age of 14. It was fantastic. But hunting, yeah, mainly pigeons, pheasant, occasionally rabbits, but the mixomatotus, it wasn't good for rabbits in my day. And the occasional fox, because they were kind of predators that were caused quite a bit of trouble. And just vermin also. But pigeons, you go out in stubbles with plastic decoy pigeons, I'm sure you're well aware. And when you get it going, you can come back with a dozen pigeons. And, you pluck the breast. It's not worth roasting them. But if you pluck the breast and just take the breast meat off, garlic and butter in the pan, lots of butter. Delicious.
I've never shot a bird.
Oh, an avian one. Hopefully that. Nasty.
No, when I talk about hunting, I talk about generally antelope, buck.
Yeah, that's the classic South African. And when I was 2015, I was into Cape Town. Because my funder at the time covered a trip because I was going to the first big low carb conference, Noakes's. And it was great because everyone there I found out knew me from my YouTubes. So I was a bit embarrassed going in, but Noakes, when he saw me, ran over and gave me a bear hug. And I never even spoken to him because he knew about my cholesterol conundrum video that went viral and he'd referenced it on radio shows, which is great. But I was there and we got the meats and they brought us out as well. We went out on not a safari, we went to a wine producing place on a bus ride towards Johannesburg. And we went for probably 50 minutes, but it was beautiful. And we had all these meats, wild meats. And it was just fantastic experience. It was superb.
Yeah, Tim, he's the reason why I changed my lifestyle. He's a great, great man. And he was on my show a few weeks ago.
Great. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I was going to say that they invited me to their big nutrition conference that's going on around now, but I have a lot of stuff on. I would have loved to go on, but it's 13, 14 hours flight and stuff going on with family at home, like it didn't suit. But I would have loved to go back and meet them all, but I hope it goes well for them.
Yeah, that flight, that's the killer.
I traveled a lot on business to Singapore and sometimes China and Thailand with my corporate, when we had huge factory builds going on. And Singapore, it's kind of tough from London. You go to London, it's an hour, and then you got your 12 and a half hour. It's long. But I kind of got used to it. And nowadays, I think the thing for flights is I need to download I don't pay YouTube. I use the YouTube downloaders. And I download a load of interesting material. Well, I mean, I don't make them, so I'm not doing anything illegal. They can follow it up at Y12D, or there's all these different named ones. But you know what? They're very clever. I know you're kind of into IT. What they do is now, the YouTube downloaders used to just download it in 1080. Just put it in, and sometimes they pop up ads, sometimes not. But now what they do, the good ones, you can download it in 360p, poor definition, which is fine for the phone, for the airline, for on a plane. But if you want the high definition, you can download the video and you can separately download the audio, but not the two together. But the great thing is you can always download both. And if you video edit, like you do, you just put them back together. But the layperson can't get them easily. But luckily I can. So it was just a side thought. But yeah, it's a long journey. Now it's not time zone. It's only an hour or two time zone different. So at least there isn't that. Like West Coast with the 8 hours or Singapore with the 8 hours and the 12 hours flights is tougher than South Africa.
I was going to say, what do you use to shoot pigeons?
Oh, the classic shotgun, a couple of shotguns. And I have one since I was 17. My first shotgun I bought was a 5-shot pump action Remington. I was probably watching too much American TV. And quickly I realized it was not a proper hunting gun. And yeah, it didn't even fit me well. I could tell I was hitting very little. So I had made a stock for my friend's father, that great guy I mentioned. He had a broken stock gun, and I made one. I carved it from a block of walnut that I bought in Chetham's in Dublin, a timber importer. And I said, I wonder, could I make one? And I did. And it worked well. I carved it with spoke shaves, shaped the whole handle, and then machined out the action with chisels. And it worked great. So I said to myself then, I wonder, does any of the gun dealers in Dublin have one with a broken stock? And I asked them, and one gun dealer had a nice little Marixa Spanish side-by-side. You know, not an amazing gun, but a nice little Spanish gun. And I convinced him to sell it to me, and he was very cynical. He said, oh, you can't make a handle for a stock for this, and oh, there's 3 tons pressure when you fire a shotgun, and oh, there's a lot of pressure. Of course, he was mixing up the pressure in the barrel and the actual, impulse to your shoulder. But anyway, so when I went back a couple of weeks later with the new stock, French polished, he wasn't laughing then. So I've had that since I was 17. I have another shotgun. I have a high-powered hunting air rifle, an air arms, lovely, lovely 22, proper 32 jewel. So like you can take out, say, a pigeon at 50, 60 yards, no problem. And yeah, that's what I have. I sold my rifle many years ago because I wasn't using it much in Ireland. Maybe it's a good thing to have nowadays, the way things are.
What rifle which rifle did you sell?
Oh, I sold it in my mid-20s. It was a Bruno Czechoslovakian BRNO 22 with a 5.
Yeah, that's a nice gun. That's a nice make.
It was a lovely little gun, and I sold it because I just wasn't using it. But it had a 5-shot magazine. But it was just a 22 standard long rifle. So probably if I was going to get a rifle now, and there are some people doing deer in Ireland, and I do have connections. During COVID, one guy wrote to me, and he's big into it, and he offered to bring me out. And I never followed up. I was too busy. So, but I'd look into that and then get something kind of proper, like a 223 or something maybe.
You mentioned Czechoslovakian. I've got a Czechoslovakian rifle. I got a CZ 600. It's a 308.
Oh, 38. Whoa. Yeah, that's more like it.
308, not 38.
Oh, sorry. I was thinking, 38 special caliber. But
no.
308, of course. 308 is common hunting, yeah.
Now, what are you going to hunt with the 38?
Well, that's when you said it. I thought it was 38 caliber, but obviously not the New York cop snub-nosed one, obviously. But I didn't know that there wasn't a 38 caliber rifle. Hunting rifle.
I'm not sure.
There's probably all kinds of stuff, because if you watch these guys in America, my son was watching them, like Demolition Ranch, and there's these guys in Texas with big YouTube channels, and they're firing all kinds of arms. So you do get to see every caliber you could dream of, including, of course, the classic 50 cal, the BMG, or I've
shot that. That's incredible.
That's a weapon. My God. But they've all other ones as well. He had a handgun that was, I think it was maybe 50 cal Magnum in a snub nose. And he made a big joke of firing it. And he's holding it like wincing, but like with the little mass of a snub nose type revolver, but the chambers around that long and the barrels that long. Because it's this huge Magnum bullet. And he's holding it. Next minute, hands come right back. But the Americans are crazy, but in a good way.
But fat. Americans are very fat now.
It's astonishing. So you've seen the like it's just hilarious.
The Walmart stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that movie, you know, Wall-E or whatever, where they're going around in floating cars. But if you look at what was the big rock concert again? God, the massive mega in America. We sometimes show pictures of it. The Rolling Stones and everyone are there. It just brain fart here. The huge open air concert. Anyway, there were a few of them. And beaches. Woodstock. All I could think was Rolling Stones for some reason. So Woodstock and all the pictures, you see them all. Guys in their mid-20s, gals in their mid-20s. They're all like, they look, nowadays people would say to them, are you sure you're okay? Because relatively they worry about people who are that slim. Everyone was that slim. And 1 in 50 or 1 in 20 in the school was a fatty. They were just addicted to carbs back in the day before everyone else was. And you just look at it, and they were 2-car families in the 50s in America. Everyone was driving everywhere from the 50s. So the 50s through to the 70s and 80s, driving was the thing. Kids were driving. Everyone was driving. And so there wasn't any more exercise per se. But then the devil's triad came in. High volume, food and gas stations, everywhere you turned was the devil's triad. And then it just took off. So now the Americans it's comical. I mean, particularly I transferred flights there in Minnesota once. You're just looking around the airport. I mean, there's a lot of these electric carts to move people. They need to be helped to move around the airport. Like it's shocking.
Is there like a default?
Well, I saw the norm in Sweden back around 2007 even. In Stockholm, my wife's brother treated us to a weekend away because we had a load of kids and were under a lot of pressure. Fair enough. And it was nice thing to do. We went to Stockholm and our jaws dropped. Even compared to Ireland in 2007, we were looking at Woodstock in Stockholm. So there you go. So you don't have to go back too far. Now, Sweden, that's another problem. Sweden now is destroyed with the mass migration. So you go to Sweden now and it's a different matter, especially Malmo. So they got marked for destruction, clearly, like Germany and all the other countries. But even back, and I was in Romania at a corporate management training. And then I brought my wife over after the 3 days intense kind of, these corporate gigs. You're all looking at the latest concepts and doing worked examples, and you're stuck with them morning till night for 3 days. Well, they did one of those in Romania, and they had European corporate guys from our corporate there. But myself and my wife walked around Romania, Bucharest, and that was probably around 2000. That could have been 2014 or 15. And I tell you, Woodstock, everywhere. So you don't have to go back too far. It all depends on when the pipeline of American-style devil's triad ultra-processed food took over your population. Always that's when it goes up.
So for guys, what is a generally good body fat percentage?
Oh, well, the super fits are down at 7 or 8%, but I guess 12 or 13 is not too bad. You know one for Dr. Ted Naiman, pal of mine on the West Coast. He loves practical because he's an engineer and then became a doctor. And one of the things he said to me, and he's right, BMI is worthless, means nothing. You have a big rugby player who's a slab of pure muscle, right? 0 diabetes. And the BMI could be like 32. So it's meaningless. It's a meaningless figure, BMI. It means nothing. Almost nothing. Waist to height ratio. This is hard to achieve, but if you look at those guys in Bucharest or Woodstock, broadly speaking, a lot of people will be getting close to a 2-to-1 waist to height ratio. And as he says, when you measure the waist, it's not like You just stand there relaxed and you put a tape around your belly button, gently. That's your actual waist. And if your waist to height is 2 or even close to 2, like 1.9, that's the ultimate measure. How many people now? Take out the tape measure, walk into any Western city and get 100 people lined up, lift up their shirts, try not to get into trouble, and measure their height and measure them relaxed around the belly button. If you get one in 100.
Yeah, when I was in Hong Kong last year, I saw almost no fat people.
Fair enough, but Hong Kong is the highest meat per capita consumption in the world and the longest, basically, longevity. And what you said. Highest meat consumption per capita, which is just another interesting fact. So the WHO are liars with their anti-meat nonsense.
In actual fact, somebody there told me that it's culturally unacceptable for women to be fat, so they look down on fat women.
Oh, misogynism. These days. Yeah, well, a lot of cultures. Now, there's other cultures, in fairness. Like, in Africa, a very large woman may help survive through very bad periods. And then they would store, the booty thing actually has some genetic background, where if you store a lot of fat around the waist, it doesn't interrupt your walking and movement. It's stored around your midpoint, and it's a massive store to save you against famine. And childbirth was important. So there are all these cultures where women who are carrying extra ballast, it was seen as survival and health. But yeah, in Hong Kong, it sounds like not so much. But we've been programmed now. You've seen all the stuff you've seen the ads from Ralph Lauren or whatever, 1980s or 90s. You have the super slim, sculpted man in his underpants and a woman in a bra and thing. The famous lady, was it Twiggy or one of them, did the famous Ralph Lauren, or maybe it was Armani? 1990s, super slim, beautiful, tanned, perfect examples of male and female, like native Indian male and female, like Hong Kong maybe. That is the blueprint for Homo sapiens, male, female. And now what have we got? They got 2 big fat blobs, kind of trans, covered in tattoos, big man boobs. That's Armani now. So they're actually
that is beautiful.
It's laughable, risible. It's comical. And I would never be anti or fat shaming. Occasionally when I'm drunk, I maybe do the wrong tweet, but generally I won't fat shame because I lecture in mental strength resilience. I got huge empathy and I've worked in weight loss with a lot of people for a long time. So I wouldn't fat shame. But outside of individual named people, it's absurd. And they're trying to teach us that not only is it not absurd and there isn't an obvious answer as to why, right? They also want to teach us, no, it's normal. It's good.
Something I do quite often when I'm in a shop and I'm in the checkout line, I always have a look to see what other people have bought. And do you do the same? It's particularly with food. It's fascinating. And you will see the same trend every time. Either fat people buy ridiculously bad food.
They do. And it's tiered. So the worst case is the fat person who doesn't give a flying F. And they have all the standard original sugar Coca-Cola maybe, all the bread and all the junk food. They just don't care. That's a chunk. Then there's a chunk, God bless them, who are fat people who would clearly like to be not fat because they've got loads of low-fat products and planty type products in their trolley. And God bless them, they don't realize that they're making it worse for themselves, but they are trying. You see they're trying, And then you've got the slim, lean people, and you just notice generally they've got smaller trolleys and they tend to be meat, fish and eggs and real food and then some vegetables and, coffee and cream. So that's my trolley. When I go into the supermarket, it's hilarious. We do buy more than that. But whenever I go and I don't know what's needed for the pantry at home, I come out with very heavy bags that are very expensive per bag. It's a big bill, but it's okay. because I have nutrient density and value density. I buy a load of meat, a couple of boxes of 12 of eggs. I get cheese and ham and meat to cook in the oven. And I get maybe 3 or 4 double creams, because we go through 3 or 4 every few days. Double cream, 250 mils. It's the way it is. And I have this bag.
250 mils. Sorry, that's not very much. I buy a litre.
True. In Ireland, sometimes with double cream, they don't always have it. They sometimes have half litres, but mostly it's 250s. It's, the standard cream comes in a litre regularly enough, but the double cream, small packets. But that's why I buy it.
Oh, yeah, double cream. Sorry. Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah, it's just the way they do it. It's perceived as smaller packaging because it's more concentrated, yada, yada, yada. I don't know. But I always just grab around 4 of them. And there might be 2 or 3 at home already, but that's fine. If there's 7, they get used well within the date. And we have them at the top of the fridge, double cream. And I always, because I'm real anal, I reordered them in their dates to put the oldest date at the back. Just because, makes sense. Whereas the kids mix them up. But we just keep using them. And they go down, then you got to put 4 more in. So the family really uses a lot of cream. It's Irish double cream from grass-fed cattle. I mean, the stuff is gold. It's gold.
Well, isn't what's also gold in Ireland is potatoes?
Yeah. I go through my weight loss masterclass, the potato diet and the fad diets. And the potato diet works. It's just an interesting aside. It works because of ultra low palatability. So the true potato diet, you can't put butter all over them and make them tasty. You just eat potatoes. You try munching through potatoes, cooked potatoes. So the reason people can actually succeed on a potato diet is they've limited themselves to the least palatable food on the planet practically. And as a result, they just don't feel like eating it, and they reduce their calories and they lose weight. But it's a scam. How sustainable is that? It's a joke. But potatoes, another interesting thing about potatoes, people say, well, the Irish ate potatoes and they were all skinny. Yeah, because they were subsistence. They were getting rabbits and fish and meat at a high premium. They knew, and they had dairy, mega dairy in Ireland, going back thousands of years. So yeah, they were filling in necessary calories with kind of basic potato glucose. But, they were subsistence, so they never got fat and they never got diabetic. But if you keep eating loads of potatoes and you introduce the devil's triad in a modern setting, boom, you're diabetic in a few years. That's it.
The one that gets me every time is when fat people switch sugar for xylitol or diabetic, something that's, they call it sugar-free or diabetic-friendly sugar or whatever.
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
It's the sugar alcohols. You could make an argument that if you want sweetness, and it's I always say in the weight loss, it's tricky because you're better off getting away from the sweet taste and triggering yourself. And then if you eat real food, you'll begin to savor it. And then if you went back to some sugar, it'd taste disgusting. So you want to get in that mode. But if you really must use sweetener for a treat or something, or added to ice cream, or you want to have ice cream but you want to make healthy ice cream yourself, something like erythritol, it's a sugar alcohol that doesn't get metabolized, so it just kind of goes through. So if you eat a lot of it, you might start farting as well, because bugs in your stomach might eat some of it. But you know what, it's got a place maybe, but I'd advise just move away from sweetness and get savory and make it your new life. And just walk away from that problem, or you could get dragged back in again,
Give me a nugget of wisdom.
Oh, God, we went through the nuggets on health. Hudson's razor. You know Nick Hudson, right?
We drink too much wine.
Yeah. Enjoy your wine sensibly. Stay safe. But no, Hudson's razor, I just love that. And I pushed it on Twitter. And God, can I remember it? It's been a while since I said it. Or he said it, and I pumped it. Got millions of views. And I thought it was just a thing of beauty. And at first when I heard it, I thought, Nice job, Nick, except it's not always true, because I'm always looking for the exception as a problem solver, as an engineer. And I actually tested it, and I realized, shit, I don't think it's ever not true. So Hudson's razor is, if there is something told to us as a global crisis, and only thing that can be entertained is a global solution, where we all need to do it together, and there's an atmosphere of censorship or harassment of any dissenters, if that scenario arises, it is always a scam. And he's correct. I don't know a single exception to that. So there's a simple heuristic. If it's a global problem and a global solution is apparently needed, and there's any pressure against people questioning it openly, it is a scam. You don't need any science. And obviously climate, COVID, and all the rest, perfect examples.
Okay, so on that note, how can I follow you?
Oh, I'd say they still allow you in even Google. If you put Ivor Cummins, you tend to get my YouTube, which is one of my main things, and my X at Fat Emperor. Thefatemperor.com, the website, I've not been using so much, but Facebook as well you'll get. So it's kind of Facebook and Twitter and YouTube are the main places I speak to the world through still. And I don't know about you, but I mirrored all my stuff to Rumble, Odyssey and BitChute years ago. Because of potential risks, which we know about. To be honest, the view numbers are so smaller than YouTube. You unfortunately have to use the devil's platform if you want to reach, I find.
You said Google, and so many people say Google. I deliberately go out of my way not to say Google. I don't use Google. I haven't used Google for about 2 to 3 years now.
Yeah.
And I when I speak to people, I don't say Google it. I say, search the internet.
True. And, you know, Brave, I believe, is a good one. My wife uses the other classic that first came out. I forget the name.
DuckDuckGo.
DuckDuckGo. To be honest with me, I'm so out there and I say everything. I don't think it makes any difference if I'm tracked anymore, because I try and have a policy of saying everything openly. So people tracking me, tracing me, it doesn't make any difference. But for people in general, of course, use Brave, use the good stuff, and don't support the beast. But I kind of said Google because even Google, which is dreadful for shadow banning, still allows Ivor Cummins to get links, as opposed to I'm on the 20th page, which happens to some people. I mean, the Great Barrington Declaration, straight afterwards for a week, Google, you could not find it. I'm just surprised they didn't do that to me. I'm shadow banned on YouTube and probably Twitter. Irish Twitter is probably shadow banning me pretty heavily. Not head office maybe. But surprisingly, you can still search for my name anyway. I don't know.
And having said that, I love that you still say Twitter. I struggle with X.
Yeah. To me, it's, hey, I did a tweet yesterday, guys. And I Googled Twitter or Brave or search Twitter downloader. And then I get to hit install the Twitter downloaders. And by the way, that's a tip there's another little tip for people. People are still screen recording Twitter and Facebook and YouTube vids. There's downloaders available for all of them that work in a couple of seconds. So you can just put the tweet address, HTML, get the tweet address or share and get the address and stick it in a Twitter downloader. It instantly gets any video. And then you can share it elsewhere.
Ivor Cummins, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Thanks so much, Jerm. Love it.